Many games have dialogue systems in them. Definitely RPGs will commonly have a dialogue system. You'll go up and you'll speak to an NPC, and sometimes they'll just chat to you, but sometimes they'll give you options and you have to choose whether you're going to make choice A or choice B or choice C, and that will have an effect on the flow of the game. Now, these dialogue systems are reasonably easy to create initially, but then when you start having to add things like localization, support for voiceovers, animations, if you want your storytellers to be able to create text files that can be imported into the game easily, that's all kind of work that needs to be done. So an off-the-shelf solution that supports all these sort of things is sometimes the better route. So one particular off-the-shelf solution is Yarn Spinner, and they have a Unity plugin that works very nicely. And so in this video I'll show you how to import Yarn Spinner into Unity, how to get it up and running, and also how to customize it to fit the look and feel of your game. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to create a brand new project. You can use any of these templates really, but I'm going to use the 2D URP template, and I'm going to call mine dialogue tutorial. Okay, so we have our empty project. If you're not used to this layout, I've actually just switched to the 2x3 layout because that's the layout I'm used to in Unity. And the first thing we're going to want to do is get the Yarn Spinner package into Unity. So if we switch to a browser, and if you go to yarnspinner.dev, you can see that this has an overview of the Yarn Spinner tool. And we want to click on install, and on the installation page we've got the recommended way of installing this, which is via the Unity Package Manager. So if we scroll down a bit here, we need to go to Project Settings and click on Package Manager. So we go to Edit, Project Settings, select Package Manager, and in here we'll type in OpenURL, and for the URL we will copy this here, paste that in there, and in scopes we will copy that and paste that in there like so, and then click Save. So we can close our project settings now, and if we go to Window and Package Manager, and in this drop down at the top here we want to choose My Registries, and now we'll see the Yarn Spinner package appear here, and we just simply want to go to the bottom right here and click Install. Okay, so that's installed. Actually, you can see there's some samples here, so if you want to check out more complicated examples of how to use the Yarn Spinner tool, there's some very cool samples here. The intro actually has some voiceover work in, so that's kind of cool. And I like that there's an addressables example here as well, because addressables are very good for keeping your installation package sizes small. Definitely very handy for web builds. Okay, so let's close this, and as you can see we have our Yarn Spinner package down here. We can open this up and we will be using some of these prefabs in this folder here. In fact, let's do that now. So we can just drag and drop the dialogue system into our sample scene here. And what it will actually do is it will pop up the import Text Mesh Pro dialog box. So you're going to want to import that. So let's click on import Text Mesh Pro Essentials, and then we can close this. Now if we click on dialog system, you can see that it needs a yarn project, and that's blank at the moment. So what might be nice is to create a folder for our project. So let's call this dialog tutorial, like so. Let's go in there, and if we right click, we can do create yarn spinner yarn script, and we'll call this tutorial. Like so. And if we right click and show in Explorer, we can see that this tutorial file is called tutorial.yarn, and if we open this with Visual Studio Code, we can see that this is just a simple text file, and you can actually install in Visual Studio Code an extension that will add a bit of functionality to these .yarn files. So if we click on extensions and we can search for yarn spinner, and you can see second one down for me is yarn spinner. I've already got it installed, but you can install this extension, and then if we come back here, you will get quite a nice little show graph button here, so you can graphically edit different nodes in your dialog, and that becomes pretty handy when you're working with quite complex dialog trees. So I'm just going to put in a couple of lines there. Hello, this is a tutorial. Let's save that. Don't worry about this position. This is actually just put in here when you do show graph. It's a way for it to remember where you're placing these nodes on this little canvas. So that's all that's doing there. Right, so if you come back to our project, if we click on our tutorial yarn file, we can actually create a new yarn project directly from this panel here. So let's do that. So we have this project file here, and it's already added under source scripts our tutorial script. And we just need to tell the dialog system to use this yarn project, so we can drag and drop that into there like so. So we're getting quite a handy dialog exception down here saying no node name start has been loaded, and if we actually look down here, we can see we are saying that the start node is called start. But if we go back to our tutorial file, we can see that our node is called tutorial. So let's fix that now, like that. And if we hit play, we've got hello, click continue, this is a tutorial. There you go. So that's how quick it is to get up and running with the yarn spinner dialog system. But presumably you're probably not going to want to use the UI how they've set it up here. And so we're going to implement a 2D speech bubble where you can go up to a NPC and it will talk to you via a speech bubble. And hopefully by going through that simple example, you'll be able to come up with UIs that fit the particular game type that you're creating. Okay, so let's first of all disable this canvas element because we won't be using that. We can delete it later. And let's add a player and an NPC. And because this is a 2D game, I'm just going to use a 2D object and just a simple capsule. And let's make this one our NPC. So let's rename it capsule NPC. And let's make the NPC maybe a reddish color. And let's create our player. Again, another capsule, which we will call player. Let's make the player a yellowish color, and let's move the player over to the left a bit, like so. Okay, so we want to have a speech bubble that appears above the NPC here. So if we right click and choose UI canvas, and I'm going to put _world on the end because this is going to be a world space canvas, meaning it's in the world along with our characters. And our NPC is at 0, 0, 0, so let's 0 these for the moment. And you'll find if you double click this that this canvas is way too big, so let's scale it down. I'm going to constrain that, so if I just change this to 0.01 it will change everything. And let's see, yeah, that's a better size here. Okay, let's change the size here, so let's make it say 300 by 200 and move it above our NPC like that. And then if we create a panel, and say if we wanted this panel to have more rounded corners, we can just play around with pixels per unit multiplier. So let's make that 0.2, and I'm going to make the panel black like that, and inside the panel I'm going to create some text, and let's stretch the text to the size of the panel like that, center it here and here. We can make it a little bit smaller. Now if we go back to the Yarn Spinner documentation and we click on components, it handily explains that the most important two components really are the dialog runner and the dialog views. Now we don't really need to touch the dialog runner, that's doing its job, but it's the dialog views that we're interested in because that's really what has control over the look and feel of the viewable dialog that's coming up. And so if we click on dialog views, and we can click on create your own custom dialog views, and it handily tells you here that you really should subclass the dialog view base class, and there is some sample code here that we can have a look at. But let's just do this and see where it takes us. So in dialog tutorial, I'm going to create a folder called scripts. And I'm going to create a C# script that I'm going to call dialog bubble. So the first thing I want to do up here is do a using yarn dot unity, like so. And I clicked on this simple speech bubble line view sample code here just so that I can easily copy the little bits and pieces that I need. So I want to subclass dialog view base, so let's do that. Let's get rid of these methods here. And we're not going to do any animation. If you want to do some animation, this is definitely a good example that shows you how to do that, but I want to keep things a little bit more simple for this tutorial. So let's just copy this container though, because we are going to want to show and hide the dialog bubble. So that's definitely handy to have. So we can override runLine to show the bubble. So let's do that. Give ourselves a bit more space here. So we can simply do container dot game object set active equal to true. We can use the dismiss line and we can override that, and that is where we can hide our bubble. Now it's using action here, so we're going to have to do a using system, so it's happy about using action. Now to complete this dismiss line, we now actually need to call on dismissal complete at the end of this method here, and then that will be happy. Now the next override we need is public override void user request view advancement. So what do we need to do in this one? Well, only if we're actually showing our bubble. So if we say if container dot game object is active self, then what we actually need to do is call advanced handler, and if it's set, invoke it like that. So what's this advanced handler? Well, this is actually an action that we need to set in runLine. So let's go back up here and let's first of all create this action. Like so. And then in runLine we can set this to request interrupt. So this request interrupt is coming from dialog view base. Of course, a lot of this code is copied from this simple speech bubble line view here. As you can see, we're copying this line here and defining our advanced handler action like this example script is doing. And that is actually enough to get all this running, but we do want to handle hitting the space bar to move the speech bubble text on, and we can do that either in a separate script, or we can do it in here. It might just be simpler for the tutorial purposes to do this in here, so let's do that. So on update, we can simply get the key down of keyword space and call user request view advancement, this one here. And as long as the speech bubble is showing, it will move on to the next bit of text. So let's save that and let's hook this up. So let's click on our canvas world. Let's drag on our dialog bubble script. Let's drag the panel into container here. And actually we have to do one more thing in here. On run line, we do actually need to put in the text, the current dialog text, which we'll be getting into this method from here. So let's do that now. So underneath here we can do serialize field, and we want the text mesh pro dot text mesh pro GUI text like that. And after we show our bubble, we can just copy in the dialog line dot text dot text, and we can see that the example code does that here. Okay, so now we can come into dialog system and we can delete the options list view because we're not actually using that, and in line view we want to use our new dialog bubble script, so we can drag that in here like so. Let's make sure that our dialog bubble script has the text mesh pro text assigned like that, and then hit play. And now we have our speech bubble saying hello. If we hit spacebar, this is a tutorial, and then it disappears. So we have a cool little speech bubble working now. What would be even cooler is if when the player comes up to the NPC, it displays the speech bubble, and if he moves away it sort of hides it again. So let's just do that bit for completeness. So on our NPC, let's just add a box collider. So we can do a box collider 2D. Let's make it a trigger, and it really wants to sort of extend out a little bit, so when our player gets close it gets triggered. So let's make it a little bit wider, make it say 3. And then let's create a simple script on here. So if we do create C# script, and I'm just gonna call this trigger event, and actually this is a little pretty generic nice script to be able to create. So I find this useful in lots of cases. tend to use this kind of script a lot. So we can do a public Unity event on trigger enter, and a public Unity event on trigger exit, like so. And we can do using Unity engine dot events here. So we can use our Unity event. So on trigger enter 2D, make sure you put the 2D on the end. We want to trigger any of the on trigger enter Unity events that we've got listed here. And on trigger exit 2D, again make sure you get the 2D on the end there. We want to trigger any of the on trigger exit Unity events. Now you may want to check for certain tags in here. I'm keeping this simple, but you may want to only trigger these when the player enters certain stuff. So you may want to check for the player tag, but like I say, keeping it pretty simple for this tutorial. We also need to make sure that these colliders are 2D colliders, so let's just change that as well. So if we come back here, and we drag this onto our NPC, and now we have a cool way of hooking up what's going to happen when we enter this area and when we exit. So nice and easy. So what we can do is, instead of auto starting, we can untick that, and we can drop this in here and then do dialog runner, start dialog tutorial. So that means that the tutorial will only trigger when we talk to this NPC, but there might be an NPC over here that you get some other dialogue from. So that enables that. And then on trigger exit, what we actually want is to be able to call something on dialog bubble that hides the dialog bubble. We could just, drag this in here and do game object set active false, but I think it's quite nice to have this a little bit tidier. So let's go back into dialog bubble and let's do a public void show bubble bool show, like that. And then that's nice because we can kind of use that everywhere, and it's a little bit clearer what we're doing. Like so. And we're going to want to start off with the bubble not showing. So let's do a show bubble false on start. So on trigger exit now, we can drag in on canvas world, and on dialog bubble we can call show bubble with that unticked, which will hide the bubble. So good, so the bubble is not showing now. Of course, if we grab our player and we move it in here, it's not doing anything because we do need to have something that can trigger our trigger. So our player will need a box collider 2D as well. We will need to set that up for being a trigger. It will also need a rigid body 2D. And let's set gravity to 0, otherwise we'll see our player rapidly disappear off the screen. Let's hit play. So let's just grab our player as we move closer. Boom. Hello. As he moves away, speech bubble disappears. If we click in here and hit spacebar, we get the whole of the dialogue like so. If the player goes away, comes back again, the dialogue restarts. And let's just, for giggles, let's create another NPC. So if we take this NPC and we Control D to clone it, and let's move this NPC over here. Let's change the color to say blue. Let's do a dialogue called blue, and this means that we'll have to create that dialogue. So let's go into here and let's Control D to clone this, but we'll call this blue. Double click, call this blue, and let's just change this to hello, I'm blue, how are you? Inspiring conversation from my NPCs. And source scripts. Now we could all shove everything under one script, but I just did it easier by creating another script. So we have to add this in our source scripts, and let's just drag in blue here. Grab our player. Hello, hello, I'm blue. Hello, hello, I'm blue. Okay, this is not exactly what I wanted. Let's sort that out. So the problem is I'm reusing this canvas world. I've only got the one, so at the moment it's starting over here over the top of this NPC, but I kind of want to move it over to the top of blue when I'm talking to blue. So let's add that functionality now to our script. So let's go back into dialog bubble, and we can just create a, let's do it underneath here. We can do a public void set position, and I just really want to give it a transform. I think that'll be the easiest. So if I do send it a target, and I want to set our speech bubble container to the position of the target. So I think that'll work. Let's see. So where will we get these targets from? Well, let's see. So let's go to our first NPC and let's create an empty game object, which we'll put at about 2.4, something like that. And this is going to be, just going to put bubble position. And on here, I want to set our position to bubble position. So let's do the same with our second NPC. So we can do create empty again, bubble position, again something like 2.4 above our head. Set position, bubble position. Right, let's see how that works. So grab our player. There you go. So that's quite nice because we only have this one canvas world that's getting reused, so it's quite performant. Obviously, if you do have multiple NPCs that need to talk all at the same time, which is a possibility, I guess, it's usually pretty unusual. The player's usually talking to one NPC at a time, but I can imagine that you may want that. Then, of course, in some ways that makes things simpler because you can just have a canvas per NPC and hook it up that way. That's fine. But this way, at least, you're reusing this one canvas world, and you can imagine that's a lot more performant than having potentially hundreds of canvas worlds, one for each NPC, and that could lead to issues. So I think that's quite nice doing it this way. And yeah, so we can do hello, this is a tutorial here, and then we can wander over to this one. Hello, I'm Blue, how are you? And yeah, endless scintillating conversations between these two wonderfully eloquent NPCs. And although that might seem like a reason, it's not too bad. This isn't a very large script. It's barely a page. This is very simple script. So you've got essentially two pretty basic scripts for handling all this. So it may seem a little bit of work. You could probably do this, get this far quite simply with about the same amount of code, writing it from scratch. But with this dialogue system, you actually have a lot of more power out of the box. You've got built-in localization. It's got the ability to rig up audio, so actual voiceovers and things like that could be added quite easily. If there's enough interest, I could do a follow-up video on this that goes into adding audio and the localization side of things. So let us know in the comments if you would find that useful and interesting. Thanks for watching.